Welcome to my channel. Welcome back if you've been here before. Today I am going to tell you a little bit about each book that I read in April. If you remember, I made a goal this year to read all books by women, and I had to break my goal because I am also in school, and I had to read this book, The Badass Librarians of Timbuktu and Their Race to Save the World's Most Precious Manuscripts by Joshua Hammer. And I actually didn't have to read this book specifically, but it just really fit the assignment, and I had already won this book actually on Instagram, which is cool. So I already had it, and it worked out that way. But anyways, it's kind of funny because I realized that it was the first book I was reading by a man, and I didn't realize that it was all about men, but it was also all about men. Women are mentioned only a handful of times throughout the book. The main character has two wives in this book, and it's briefly noted that those wives are not happy and they don't like being one. Each one doesn't like really being one of two wives, but it's just sort of like mentioned briefly and then never really mentioned again. And they're not really characters in the book. And also, women can work in Timbuktu, which is in Mali. It's a long, complicated history. I don't really want to get into it here. If you're interested in that history, this is a really good book to kind of like lay it out. Like, I didn't know where Timbuktu even was. I mean, that's pretty bad, but I didn't even know what country it was in. I didn't even really know that it was in Africa, but it's in Mali, which is in Western Africa, Northwestern Africa. And so if you're interested in that, I would recommend this book because it's a very, very concise overview of that area and the history. And Timbuktu was kind of like colonized by the French, and then it was free again, and then it was taken over by Al-Qaeda. So it's an interesting history. If you like history, it's good. But it's also written by a journalist, and it's so written in like a journalist style that I just was not a fan of. It was really hard to get into. The writing was descriptive, but so concise that it was just like, there was never like a thread that I felt like I could just follow the story. He would just kind of like report on facts, and I wasn't really sure why we were being given facts or like how it was relevant to the story. So I was always confused as to like, okay, well, like is that just like an anecdote, or am I supposed to pay attention to that because it'll come back later? So I wasn't really a fan of this book for that reason. He didn't really talk too much about the manuscripts, and I felt like that was a big reason of why to read this book, so I didn't really like that. But the story itself is cool. I have a big issue with the title. I'm sorry to Simon & Schuster, but this is just like such a lame way to try to get people to buy your book by giving it this title, The Badass Librarians of Timbuktu. This story in the book even ends in 2016. It's a true story. This is a nonfiction book about a situation that really happened, where they really did have to save the world's most precious manuscripts, which were also their cultural and familial heritage. They had to save them from terrorists, from Al-Qaeda. They had to take them through a war-torn country and risk literally life and limb. And I just feel like calling it The Badass Librarians of Timbuktu when real people were killed and real people had their limbs chopped off is just, it's so cavalier and like insulting. It just makes it sound like it's Ocean's 11. I don't know, that's just like what this sounds like to me from the title, and it's not like that at all. It's like super serious and really terrifying and true and really recent. So also, if this had happened like 2,000 years ago, maybe it'd be fine to say that, oh, they were the badass librarians, like in their race to save the manuscripts. Maybe like then there'd be critical distance if those people weren't still alive. This literally is still like something that's happening. Like the manuscripts haven't even been returned to their proper location. So anyways, I have a big problem with that. I'm not a fan of this name. In general, I wouldn't really recommend this book unless you're specifically interested in the Middle Eastern like conflict in general. Like if that's an interest of yours, I'd recommend this. Otherwise, I'm gonna donate it. This month I finished reading a book of essays called Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay. It's a New York Times bestseller. It's the first Roxane Gay book I read. She writes a lot for different publications, but I think this is her first book of essays, but she does have 2 more books coming out this year, which I'm looking forward to, and I think they explore similar topics. So this book explores gender, sexuality, class, race, entertainment, pop culture. They're all really interesting topics, and they're all really relevant to today, and I really, really love her point of view that she brings to the conversation, and I really like that she addresses, she doesn't just say like, oh, I hated this thing, so everything about it was bad. A lot of times she'll say, I hated this movie, and I will give it credit for the couple things that were good about it, but it also just, I still hated it. And I really liked that. I just loved her writing style. I felt like she was so smart and thoughtful, and she chose her words really carefully, but they seemed to flow so naturally. It was like a really, really educated person was talking to you. It was like she has a really big vocabulary, but she doesn't like wield it against you. You know how sometimes you read and people are just like obviously using a thesaurus or like trying to put in big words to seem impressive? She does use very thoughtful set of vocabulary, but she doesn't hit you over the head with it. So I really liked that. Even though it was like dense, I guess I would say, it was so easy to get through. And they're all different lengths, all these essays, so you could like go in any order or read them in order, and they are thoughtfully organized so that if you want to go in order, each one kind of flows to the next, but you could read each as a standalone as well. Yeah, I just really, really liked it, and I have a bunch of underlines and stuff. Another book I read this month, I actually reread it. It's called Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. The back of the book kind of says it all. It says, "This is the journey of surviving through poetry. This is the blood, sweat, tears of 21 years. This is my heart in your hands. This is the hurting, the loving, the breaking, the healing." And that's written by the author. And those 4 lines at the end, the hurting, the loving, the breaking, and the healing, are sections of the book. So it really takes you on a journey. This book actually totally reminds me of Lemonade, the visual album by Beyonce. If you like that, I think you'll really like this book. And also, I didn't notice this the first time I read it because I hadn't really heard of her before, but one of the poems here is a kind of a response to a War-Sung Shire poem. And here I have another book that I read this month by War-Sung Shire. This is really tiny, but it's called Teaching My Mother How to Give Birth, and it's a book of poems. I actually haven't finished it yet, so I'm not going to talk about it just yet, but I'll try to put it next in this video when I edit so that it kind of flows. Anyways, I think their poems are really similar because they're very short, they're very honest, they deal with very difficult topics in a really thoughtful way. And one thing I really love about Rupi Kaur is, you should look her up on Instagram if you have Instagram, because she posts a lot of her poetry, and she does these illustrations with her poems. And you can see all my post-its that I have in this because we were going to read it for my book club this month, but everyone was too busy and stressed and getting sick, so we rescheduled for May. So I will update you after that happens, but these are all my post-its for my favorite poems for book club. I guess I'll just read a couple of my absolute favorite ones to you guys so you can get a sense of what her poems are like. They're usually very short, there's a couple longer ones. "If you were born with the weakness to fall, you were born with the strength to rise. I don't know what living a balanced life feels like. When I am sad, I don't cry, I pour. When I am happy, I don't smile, I glow. When I'm angry, I don't yell, I burn. The good thing about feeling in extremes is, when I love, I give them wings. But perhaps that isn't such a good thing because they always tend to leave. And you should see me when my heart is broken. I don't grieve, I shatter." Oh, it gives me goosebumps. I love these poems so much. They're just so honest and they're so straightforward, and I think that that's a little bit similar to my personality, which is probably why I really like them. Even if you're not like into poetry, because I wouldn't say I'm into poetry, this book, I just still love it. Again, second time reading it. I don't often reread books, but you can read this book in like an hour because all the poems are really short, and yeah, I just highly recommend it. War-Sung Shire's poems just really they're really raw, they're really like evocative. I mean, they're poems, so of course they are, but her and Rupi Kaur definitely share a similar style where they're really upfront and really honest and really like kind of hit you in the face almost with like the raw intensity of the situation and of the emotions. But I feel like Rupi Kaur is a little bit more like soft and feminine, and War-Sung Shire is a little bit more raw and almost like earthy, if that makes sense. Very much about like sensation. Like, it really is evocative in terms of like tastes and smells and sights and like colors, and just really like painting a picture really intensely. So for example, I said that my favorite ones were Birds, Beauty, and the Kitchen, so I'll just read you like the end of the kitchen. "Vine leaves and olives, you let him lift you by the waist. Cinnamon and tamarind lay you down on the kitchen counter. Almonds soaked in rose water, your husband is hungry. Sweet mangoes and sugared lemon, he had forgotten the way you taste. Sourdough and cumin, but she cannot make him eat like you." There's a lot about sex. But anyways, just loved this. Love it, love it, love it. Gonna give it to my friend and would definitely read it again. Another book that I read in April was The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. The book is really good. It's kind of long, but it's YA, so it goes very fast, and it follows a 16-year-old named Star who moves between a poor black neighborhood where she lives and the fancy suburban prep school that she attends. And it's about this like uneasy balance between these two different worlds, and basically the balance gets thrown off when unfortunately she is driving with her friend and they get pulled over by a cop, and the cop shoots her friend. And this is at the very beginning, so it's not really a spoiler. But anyways, this is really relevant to everything that's happening just in our country right now. It does talk about the Black Lives Matter movement. I think it's a really, really, really good book for anyone, young adults, but also adults, and even some younger teens, to understand sort of what's happening in real life. These issues aren't really, I don't think, personally handled very well by the news, so even though this is fiction, I would highly recommend this for anyone who wants to learn more about these issues, understand. It opens up so many areas for discussion and contemplation and personal reflection. I just really, really recommend this book. Really just enjoyed reading it also, and I did shed a tear at the very end. It's just such a good book. You just really love the characters, and it's a good book anyways. Like, yeah, it's heavy because a lot of bad stuff happens, but it's just dealt with in such a wonderfully thoughtful way. And I think also the characters are all really likable, which helps you kind of get through those more difficult themes and circumstances and situations, events that arise. So highly recommend The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. I have to apologize if it seems like I'm rushing, because I kind of am, because this video is going to get really too long because I read a lot in April. So I randomly, I don't know why, I think I read it on like a list of best new graphic novels or something. I randomly picked up Paper Girls 1 and Paper Girls 2. The first 2 volumes of the Paper Girls series. I'll just read you the back so that you know what it is. In the early hours after Halloween of 1988, 4 12-year-old newspaper delivery girls uncover the most important story of all time. Suburban drama and supernatural mysteries collide in this smash hit series about nostalgia, first jobs, and the last days of childhood. It's really good, you guys. It's written and illustrated by 4 dudes, but it's about 4 girls, and it's really good. It's just awesome. They're really badass. There's no like softness about them. They're just like awesome characters, and I just read one and then the other really fast, so you can read these like super fast. I just did this when I wanted to not do work. And the illustrations are really, really cool and beautiful. Like the color tones are really interesting, and there are monsters, and there is some sort of like save the world aspect, which I'm generally like not into. I'm not into like superheroes or things, which is why I haven't read a lot of comics or graphic novels, but I feel like this is just enough. Like, it's not too much to turn you off if you're not into monsters, but there is like time travel and alternate dimension type situations, which I am into. So if you like sci-fi but you don't really like superheroes or monsters too much, this is a really good balance. And there is some sort of like kind of pop culture stuff integrated too, since it is in the 80s. It kind of reminds me, like, if you like Stranger Things, you'll probably like this. I finally finished reading Assassination Vacation by Sarah Vowell. If you don't remember what I initially said about all of these books, you can check out the video that I made explaining what I was going to be reading this month, and I'll put a link to it up here. Okay, sorry to spring this shitty video quality on you here at the end, if you've made it all the way to the end, which you might not have because it's so long. I know, I'm sorry, I read too much in April. But anyways, Assassination Vacation, I thought it was like okay. It was a little bit like self-indulgent, I thought, on her part, of like her story and with history, even though like she was just like describing like her process of going places and doing research, which like was fine. But anyways, I have this little post-it because from page 137 to 151 was amazing. It was just like, if you ever walk by that book in the library, just go to page 137 and read until 151, and it's about like a sex cult and how it's related to an assassination of a president. Trust me, it's so entertaining, it's so well written. It's like exactly why Sarah Vowell is awesome, because she makes these like connections between all these different things that you really would have to be like a total history buff to know, which is what she is, which is also why I didn't really love the book. So I think that it's not really a book for people who aren't already like super into history. If you're really into history, then I'd recommend it. But if you're not, maybe skip that one and try a different one of hers. So anyways, if you made it this far, thanks so much for watching. I will try to be more on it in the future, but I just wanted to get something up because this video is too long and it's already May 6th. So anyways, happy reading, have a good month, and I'll see you next time. Bye!